So Arborist Call, we're doing the agenda a little bit different today since we just had one 2 weeks ago. Normally we have like what's going on with ZBD, what's going on with Zcash D. We're actually going to skip the, kind of the node updates today since we just had them 2 weeks ago, which will leave more time for just kind of the discussions. The ones that we kind of had, NU5 and Orchard's kind of a carryover from last Arborist Call. And then Dodger had suggested, that we talk about possibly setting up some, subgroups or working groups to maybe not, we could do an update on the Arborist Call, but have like small groups working on or talking about HSM support or, pool deprecation plans or pool life cycle, if you will, however you'd like to phrase that, things along those lines that might come up from time to time, as opposed to trying to fit it all in a single call. And then also like Internode testing, like, ZBD and Zcash D, given that, kind of the imminent, I guess, availability of ZBD and then having ZBD ready to actually sync with Orchard sometime in the near future, during the testnet, phase, if you will. Were there any Internode testing opportunities? So we wanted to kind of chat about that. And then we wanted to chat about call structure, which was, I believe it was Chelsea. And I apologize, I can't see like any participants. I think it was Chelsea kind of chatting about that, but how often do we have it? Does 2 weeks work for everyone? Is the format, should we do note updates, every other call and just have the discussions? Should we have the working groups? So it's just kind of an open-ended discussion on that. And then just kind of course, the wrap up, any action items or carryovers for next time. So, okay, let me look in the chat really quickly. Okay, all right, looks good. All right, let me get that. Okay, so so monthly Arborist Calls, everyone I think pretty much knows, but we talk about the protocol. Where protocol contributors get together to talk about what's going on. The purpose is to make it more accessible. We will hopefully with ZOMG have more and more teams working at the protocol level shortly, near term. So it's to kind of make it more accessible for everyone interested in that, and anybody can participate. We can talk about this in the call format discussion, but just you can email me, that's fine, or go to the R&D Discord. That is working really well. Big shout out to Hudson for setting that up. That is going incredibly well, I think, for everyone. So yeah, huge shout out to Hudson on that. Yep, so anyway, that's kind of that. NU5 and Orchard kind of carrying over from last time. So oh man, I hope I got yeah, I do. Okay. I was like, I hope I didn't lose my graphic somehow. So the features, again, this is what we had up last time that we're kind of proposing for NU5. The following zips, 216 canonical point encodings, 224 is Orchard. Now Orchard, the zip itself, 224 will have like the rationale, but obviously the bulk of the Orchard protocol is documented in the protocol spec itself. So that's just an FYI. I think most everyone looking at that would understand that. Zip 225 is version 5 transaction format. 244 transaction ID non-malleability, and then 252 is the deployment of the NU5 network upgrade, which contains consensus branch ID, for example, just the specifics of the upgrade itself.
Oh, thanks, Teo, for making a start on that zip 252. That was very useful.
That worked out really well. So this is a kind of the nub diagram that I had last time, and I've added some items in blue just to kind of show some specific things that we've nailed down since the last call. So I'll just kind of move across the ones we've added. So the team this week has been going through a multi-address UX design sprint, which is essentially where we just kind of press pause. This is primarily the wallet team, of course, but it has ramifications for Libra, Zcash, and also the SDKs. But we just really press pause, zoom out, and talk about the problem space of supporting multiple addresses in the wallet, reference apps that we have, the SDKs, and again, Libra Zcash. And that's just to make sure that we kind of leave no stone unturned, talk about the UX, options for the UX, et cetera. So that's kind of ongoing. We wanted to do that well ahead of, when we actually kind of started working with partners, engaging with partners. So we'd have at least a starter set of thoughts around UX that we could then work with other wallet vendors on. So that's ongoing, has been, super successful in my opinion. It's a really good time. Teams really enjoy it too. So it's a really fun thing. It's modeled after the Google design sprints, if anyone's interested in or might be familiar with those. We have locked down, we're doing multiple audits, software and protocol audits. We've locked down NCC to do the specification and implementation audit. We're also in talks with another vendor to do a similar thing, a little bit more focus on the cryptography. But the specification audit from NCC would start in March, would cover all the zips in NU5. And then the implementation audit would be the first half of May. Our target for the security proof for Halo is to be complete roughly April 1st. And we've got a scientific peer review starting the week of April 5th, I believe is that Monday. So those are a couple of, a few updates there to the schedule we had up last time with some specifics. When we have the next audit vendor locked down, then of course we can talk about who it is, but it'll definitely be a well-known name that everyone would be pretty familiar with. So Dodger, one of the questions that you had was about, kind of gating factors and things of that nature. So, I mean, we're going to have the multiple audits from different vendors, peer review from Mary Mahler, by the way, who is pretty familiar with Zcash and super well respected. She's doing scientific peer review. And these are all kind of absolutes, like these have to happen. The reports will be published publicly, of course, once they're reviewed and remediation occurs, if, to the extent there is any. But all this would have to be deemed successful before, moving ahead with, kind of the next phase of implementation along the NU5 pipeline. So,
so for the, just so I grok,
mm-hmm.
Mary and the scientific peer review, is that target April 5th? Or
Yeah, April 5th. I think that's on Monday.
Okay.
I don't have my calendar up, but we were targeting having the security proof done by end of the month in March.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought, okay, few days buffer in there. Let's pick a week that would be good to kind of kick that off. So April the 5th, roughly. Mm-hmm.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Okay. And then moving ahead. So this is a from the post that the foundation did.
Yes, the 5th is a Monday.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Dara. I thought it was, yeah, because that's the date I gave to Mary. So I hope I didn't mess that up. But this was the from the blog post the foundation did after it's kind of the first post about Halo, and it was just hey, here are some conditions we think we should address before we deploy. So yeah, so I mean, we just move through these. The Halo 2 proof system should have a specification along the lines of sapling. Again, we're currently adding that to the Zcash protocol spec. The target, Dara's made incredible progress on that. The target's to have that ready on by Monday, along with all the other zips in draft form. Yeah, number 2, the proof system should receive independent scientific peer review. That's what Mary's going to do for us on that side. Number 3, outside code review along the lines of what NCC did for sapling. Yeah, we're already engaged NCC. And again, we're looking at an additional vendor a little bit more focused on the cryptography side of things. Any changes to consensus rules such as deprecation, sprout deprecation, use of new turnstiles should be clearly announced to community well in advance of deployment. So in U5, we don't have any proposal for, let's prevent anyone from creating Sprout notes, for example. So no concrete, this goes in and now therefore you can't do anything with Sprout anymore. But to Dodger's point about pool deprecation and lifecycle, and I know Nate's been spending quite a bit of time thinking about this and coming up with, how can we come up with a consistent methodology and language to talk about pools, like which one's, current and which one's active and which one's non-active. I forget the actual terms that he had, but there'll be no consensus changes that we're proposing to do anything with Sprout, but we do have some thoughts and would love to set up like a working group to talk through pool deprecation, life cycle. So,
Great.
so that's that. We will definitely have a turnstile, of course, along the lines of what we had from Sprout to sapling. And, it'll be the same thing. It'll flow through the transparent pool, but not necessarily through a transparent address. And yeah, it'll function just the same. The design will be roughly the same. You kind of set migration, Z-set migration, and it'll happen. We'll talk through some of the specifics and present those at a later time, but yeah, definitely a turnstile involved.
Yeah, one design decision that needs to be considered is to what extent is this opt-in and to what extent is it opt-out? Because it does simplify the handling of multiple pools if we can kind of assume that most of people's money is in the most recent pool. So we need to think about consent issues for so how we communicate to users that that's what's happening.
Yeah, because like in Sprout, we like in the Sprout to sapling migration, the consensus rules did not prevent anyone creating Sprout to sapling or sapling to Sprout transactions.
Right.
It was a Zcash D level UX rule that we put in place to just like, if you're using Zcash D, we won't allow you to do this except via the migration tool. But like that's part of the discussion that we need to have with wallets and other people in the upcoming pieces to decide how we want to handle it. Because at the consensus level, we're planning to do the same thing as with Sprout, so that the value needs to be revealed, but there's no other restrictions at the consensus level that we're proposing.
Right, and it was kind of a staged scheduling thing, right, Strad, where it didn't just like en masse send everything at one time. It kind of split it up.
In the migration tool that was for Sprout to sapling, that was the case. Yes.
Yes. Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Every 500 blocks or every 50 blocks, I can't remember.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it started like every 500 blocks, and then like at block 495. It started building the list of migration transactions.
Well, it had to do that because Sprout was so slow.
Right. So I was looking at that code the other day, but that was pretty cool to see in the code like that.
Yeah, we probably won't need that much lead time for sapling to orchard.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's specified in ZIP 308, which is this.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So number 5, software API changes such as modifications to Libra Zcash. The SDKs should be explained to the community as part of proposed zip release process. Software libraries finalized with sufficient time for developers to integrate and test them. I mentioned the design sprint we're having. We've already been working on it prior to that. The design sprint was focused on that very thing, and we'll be, engaging kind of as a I guess a next step with that on Monday, now that it will have closed by then, to talk about specifically, okay, what do we need to do in Libra, Zcash, and the SDKs, and then also begin to validate with folks that are using those components, so that
like
they get their feedback in. Yes, Aditya, Nighthawk, Unstoppable, yeah, all those folks. Number 6, have a deprecation proposal so that if this new feature needs to be migrated away from in the future, protocol complexity stays down over time. I think that ties in really nicely with kind of a pool life cycle, which again, Nate's been working on just so that you have not specific, but here's what we, it's kind of, here's what we do with shielded pools. Here's the active one. Here's the current one. These are active, that kind of thing. And it's kind of that, okay, well, how are they phased out? Well, step one, can't send new funds in. You can send funds between, or you can send funds out. So maybe that's like step one of inactivity, but that is something definitely we want to explore and have a really good handle on. So yeah, protocol complexity stays down, which then in turn reduces attack service overall and just makes code maintenance easier. If we don't have to keep up with different protocol implementations. And then number seven,
I've been very encouraged by the fact that the Sprout pool has gone down quite a bit. So,
yeah,
and there's yeah, it went down a lot. And then there's also another group. I have no idea who they are, but they were asking, if anyone had any Sprout funds, they could just test the migration utility with a little bit. And so we had some kudos to Strad for helping them out on that. So there should hopefully be more migrating out of Sprout, near term. And then number seven, most critically, wallet developers exchanges, no developers should be given sufficient time to review all the changes. So going back to the timeline, the kind of where we're sitting obviously is, right here toward the end of February. Our plan is to have all the proposals we're making for NU5 ready on Monday, draft zips, draft protocol spec. That's obviously for the specification audit, as well as, community discussion around those zips. We'll probably get a blog post out that just kind of, a little synopsis of each one of those, and then post something in the forums to kind of have a means of discussion around those zips. So that's kind of current thought at the moment. And then what we would plan to do is, have a testnet activation where the code was active on testnet for about 3 months. We'll start working again well ahead of that with partners. We'll be engaging early in March with wallet vendors. And we did one level of ecosystem outreach back right after the first of the year to just begin to introduce everyone to Halo, give them the basics, or I should say Orchard, the basics of what that would look like, what it would mean, depending on what type ecosystem partner you were, with the zips, in draft format and the spec. We'll begin in earnest early March, reaching back out to those partners with obviously more information now, and then begin to work with them specifically on what they might need to do to be ready to, test on, testnet essentially in that 3-month period that we have to be ready for mainnet activation.
Great.
So questions about any of this, I can also pop into the chat. I don't know if anything came in there.
Some links from Dara and Dodger on old Sprout to sapling deprecation and turnstiles. Sounds great.
Right. Okay. All right. So I mean that's literally all the slides I had. So let me.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Dodger.
If something does slip, so let's say there's one of the audits throws up something and it causes things to, it looks like the deadline's going to be missed. What will happen then?
Well, I mean, so the audits and things of that nature, like we've always done, like we have to be able to successfully remediate anything that's found in the audits before anyone's comfortable moving forward with an activation at that point. We structured the audit so we get, kind of a midpoint, feedback set. So if there is anything that's found, we can get a jump start on working on it prior to the, conclusion of the audit, which the two pieces actually run usually a couple of weeks each because they pretty much get focused on it. But yeah, I mean, we have to have successful remediation of anything found in any of the audits prior to mainnet activation. So, and
I mean, it kind of depends on how serious the problem
oh,
is.
right. Well, definitely. I mean, if it's like you could update the verbiage in your spec, or you should, then that's okay. That's not make or break.
So
But if it's,
just to give an idea, I think at least 90% of any audit is going to be nitpicking, and that has been the case for every audit we've had. That said, it is possible that something more serious could be found.
Right.
And at the end of the day, if it's very serious, then we might have to just cancel the schedule and just completely rethink it.
Mm.
I guess I'm more interested in if there's something that doesn't involve ditching Halo altogether,
right.
but does just mean that the timelines just get pushed,
Squashed.
so that for example, there has to be a re-release of testnet in order to do proper testing.
Let's think of a more concrete example. We could find, for example, at the say at the end of sometime in June, that we need to reset testnet. So that's a possibility.
What the issue is doesn't matter. Just assume that there is a thing, something arises that cause. And I think Nate's phrased it well. How much can the timeline slip versus when do we kick out features to a later upgrade? And I guess that there's an answer inherent in there, in that if things slip to the point where mainnet activation, I'm just interpreting what Nate says, and Nate, feel free to jump in and correct me here, but it sounds like what Nate is suggesting is that if things slip, it won't be a case of pushing back mainnet activation by a month or 6 weeks. It'll be a case of going, right, we're not going to deploy this in this upgrade. We're going to go to the next one, whenever that's scheduled later at the end of the year. Is that the plan?
So I think, this is tricky. The gray areas are tricky. So there are some things that are more nailed down than others. So the way we release Zcash D is there's sort of this release cycle. Releases deprecate after a certain period of time, and then we use that timing window to decide when we make a release that bakes in the new rules and the height. So over here, where we see on this timeline between May and June, where we have Zcash D mainnet support release, that release has a height baked into it. So we would all have to agree what that number is before we made this release, or else Zcash D would have to change how we're doing releases. So if we've already made that release and then we discover something that suggests we need to, like if we need to patch that release because that is a release that could be active when mainnet activates, that's already complicating the deployment, right? Because we would have to require all users of that release to upgrade, or have some way to mitigate the issue. So that is like a tricky date after which mitigations can become more complicated.
Remind me what's the current end of life duration for Zcash?
16 weeks.
Yeah, 16 weeks. But then, for example, the testnet support release, the one prior to that, we generally shorten its support window to make sure that it expires prior to mainnet activation. Because obviously it supports it on testnet, but it doesn't support it on mainnet.
Yeah.
Right.
So if we discover a flaw that requires fixing before that Zcash D mainnet release date, it's easier to slide the schedule. But then, of course, the question is, will this take 2 weeks to mitigate, or like 2 weeks to do the development and testing, or will it take 2 months or 5 months? And sometimes you don't know. So
there are two possible contingency plans. So there are basically two features being shipped with Orchard. There's the Orchard shielded protocol, and there's the transaction ID non-malleability And either of those make sense on their own. So if I understand correctly, the contingency plan is if we find a showstopper bug in one of them, then we just do the other one. And the spec changes needed to go from doing both to doing just one of them are pretty straightforward. In fact, we could ask the NCC, for example, to consider that contingency.
Okay, but
Question from Hudson.
No, there is not, Hudson. The
okay.
no, the once a release is out with the hype baked in, its view of the consensus rules is these are the consensus rules that exist. Those nodes are the that is the fork they will follow.
That's the
Right,
fork
so
they'll
you would
follow
treat
at
it
a
as a
certain
security.
point, but like what would be the problem with having a flag? I know I've heard arguments in the past about it, but it's actually worked well for Geth and Ethereum.
Yeah, I mean, so this is an engineering taste thing. Generally, the thinking is if that's not configurable, we know what that version of the software does, and then we can sort of reason based on that.
Can I give my answer to that?
Yep. Go
Sure.
ahead, Zuko.
I think kind of the most, or one of the most critical points of ECC's decision making is what I think of as software support policy. Like, if you report a bug on like Solaris, are we going to pay attention to that or not? And the answer is not, because we don't support Solaris, right? And I think of whether things are configurable as flags or whether you have to edit your code and recompile as the way we communicate whether we support it or not. So everything that you can configure in the conf file will support if there's a bug there. Everything that you have to recompile your code, we won't support. And then you'll know that because you'll realize I recompiled my own code. I guess I can't get someone else to support it. And I think, I'm not 100% sure.
There's actually a distinction between experimental features and standard.
Right,
features,
and there's this
but
other
yes.
class of things that explicitly are there, but we're definitely not going to treat them as supported, right? So anyway, I'm like 80% sure that the block height for auto expiry should be in the unsupported class, which means you can definitely fix that by editing the code and recompiling or getting someone else to do that for you. And then if, like Hudson was saying, something comes up, like has happened with Geth, and you're like, oh, actually, we all need to shift this to be 3 months later than we thought, then I think this is a good way for ECC to communicate that we will give you tech support for shifting it 3 months later. And the way we communicate that is by giving you a new binary.
Yeah. There's also a technical point in that the way in which network upgrades are implemented and deployed in Zcash, the activation height is part of the set of consensus rules.
Yes.
So if you change the activation height, you are changing the consensus rules, and therefore you can't just change the height is the thing. You actually have to change the consensus branch ID as well.
Okay,
so
that's
like,
I didn't know how that. Yeah, because what you're saying is it's bundled.
Yes, it's an important part of of us being clear about what the consensus rules are and like unambiguous on the chain, and also there's elements used for replay protection as well.
Yeah, my answer was also confused because I was talking about the end of support halt height, not the activation height.
Yeah, so like it's not that we couldn't come up with a alternate strategy for this for subsequent network upgrades, but I would want it wouldn't. I don't believe it would be as simple as just adding a block height flag to Zcash.
Right, but
I would want
actually,
more technical analysis on the effects of it.
One way of thinking about it is that the deadline for specification is Monday, and this would have needed to be proposed.
Oh yeah, no, this
ago.
wasn't. This isn't more of a like well into the future
This
thing.
is just
I wouldn't want this now.
more of a question.
No, that's fine.
Yeah. So
I might just speak to this
from. I might just speak to this from Zebra's perspective, if people don't mind.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so we don't have an expiry date for our binaries, but we will use the consensus branch ID. So when the new spec, when the revised spec comes out with the new consensus branch ID. Older versions of Zebra won't follow that branch, and newer versions will. So that's how we would enforce that for Zebra.
Yeah. And you'll have like rewinding in the case that you were following and had to switch back or something. Like, because there's a bunch of edge cases in like, what if you forget to upgrade your node, it passes the old activation height, and then you go, oh, damn it, sorry, I need to upgrade my node because it stopped working. Are you going to
Yeah, we have a ticket for that, and I will make sure it's marked with the network upgrade 5 tag right now so that we do it. But yes, what we currently do when the database version changes is simply throw away the database, and that might be possible to do in that case as well. It's a bit more expensive,
certainly helps solve the
but
problems.
it will definitely work.
And we consider that a acceptable cost because the syncing so far has been reliably 2.5 hours if you have decent internet with Zebra. So it's like, you could just
which is great.
State.
Yeah, that's very good. So
let
generally,
me just say my answer was about end of support halt instead of being about the question, which was activation height. But the general principle still applies. We think of whether there's a configuration option or instead whether you have to edit the source code and recompile as the way to communicate back and forth between ECC and ECC's users about supported / non-supported status.
Yeah, that's
Got
good.
it. Okay, that answers my question.
User doesn't just mean end user; it means wallet developers and people like that.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
So generally, Dodger and everyone as well, we're obviously right here, and the closer we get to mainnet support release, we're doing several things to mitigate the possibility we do have something severe and we need to either push the activation timeline or decide to drop something from the network upgrade. So having gone through like multiple audits from different vendors, both at the spec level and implementation level, review of the security proof and the cryptography, and then working with partners early on, even though testnet officially is beginning first part of May. I think we're doing everything we can to make sure when we're getting into this latter part of May, we have a really good idea. We've got we've got a solid set of features for the network upgrade. So
yeah, well, I guess like this is kind of a binary question.
Yeah,
if there's an issue, will the mainnet activation target date be pushed back by sort of weeks, or will the feature with which there's an issue be pulled from this network upgrade and be targeted for network upgrade 6?
So it depends on the issue that happens, but
either of those could happen.
Yeah, but I think Dodger really wants to know like what's the wiggle room, and like if it's 2 weeks, that's one thing. If it's 2 months, are we willing to go that far? And I don't think we are willing to go that far, but that's just my opinion. I don't know really what the wiggle room is, but I think it's closer to 2 weeks than it is to 2 months, personally.
Yeah,
I would agree with Sean totally on that. Yeah.
Like if we looked at like the things that are on there, for instance, like I could see like pushing testnet activation back by 2 weeks as being still comfortable enough. Like that still gives a bit of space to like run the testnet activation. And like if we found a problem in the spec that required that and we had to delay testnet support release, up to 2 weeks I would be comfortable with. More than that, I would be uncomfortable with.
Another thing is if you superimpose a timeline like this for the NU6 and you see when does draft zip submission deadline for NU6 end up being, and that might be a good starting point to figure out what the wiggle room is for that sort of stuff.
There is some overlap.
Yep, there is.
Isn't very big.
No, I think it's a couple weeks overlap. Not positive, but I'll tell you in 1 sec.
I just want to throw in that this reminds me of a discussion that we had at ECC a couple of years back when we were talking about the original version of the network upgrade pipeline, where I was arguing in favor of just not having scheduled network upgrades and just saying, right, when there's something that's ready to go, we just then say, right, there's going to be a network upgrade in X months time, versus Nate's perspective, which won out, which I'll let him describe because he's waiting to speak.
Oh yeah, I mean I think there's kind of a general trade-off between aiming for a set of features and then shipping them once they're ready versus aiming for a release date and pulling out features to hit that date. Those I think are kind of two different strategies or two different trade-offs for shipping stuff. So, but I think
which have been used successfully by different projects.
Yep. Yeah, it's just yep. So I do think though, and when we talk about the wiggle room, there is a gray area, and it is getting much more complex with Zebra coming online, which is awesome. But that means, for example, let's say a flaw in the design, in the protocol design is discovered like in late April. It's kind of easy to say, oh, well, if fixing it takes 2 weeks, then let's push it back. If it takes 3 months, let's postpone it to the next upgrade. But we won't know for sure how long it will take to mitigate. So I can easily see a bad scenario where we do sort of this iteration where we're like, oh, we should be able to fix this in 2 weeks. And then one or both client teams is like, we just, uncovered this hairy thing, but we think we can fix this one in 2 weeks. And I feel like that's a common kind of dynamic. Yeah, so I still think we need some sort of go, no-go date where even if it feels like the fix is just around the corner, but we've hit this deadline, we just have to eject that feature. If we, yeah.
So would this be before testnet activation or?
No, we've done fixes. So like, for example, we did make changes to the sapling circuit after testnet activation before mainnet to address some issues. I think, was that the endianness problem we fixed, or was there one other one?
It was, yes.
It was the endianness problem, yeah. Where there was mixed endianness and we wanted to make it little endian. So that obviously necessitated.
It was always specified as little endian.
Yeah, but it was an implementation problem. So so that resulted in, it meant that the parameters had to be redone, which it worked out fine.
Well, the parameters that we deployed for testnet were generated like on my computer.
Yeah, right, because it's for testnet. Yeah.
So we had that constraint, but we were able to hit that. But actually, I'd forgotten that the testnet ones would have been different anyway, because the point I was going to make is that we wanted to make sure that testnet and mainnet were as close as possible. So we did do a rollback of testnet. So like testnet had activated, everyone had done that and seen it had passed, and then we effectively altered the testnet activation height, Hudson. And by doing that, by changing the consensus branch ID, so all the nodes on testnet would roll back to that point and then start again, which testnet's fine. But yeah, we have done those before and are comfortable with doing them again if necessary.
It's not desirable, but we could
not
do
desirable.
it.
No,
we could do it in the first.
It was appropriate for sapling because of the other pressures that were.
Yes.
Yeah, but yes, so for instance, then if there were something that came up, for example, in the implementation audit, and it happened to be of a nature that it meant that it altered the consensus rules in some way, like a ZIP 215 style bug was found or something, then yeah, I would see us as going, yeah, we'll roll back testnet activation. We've had one pass, cool. Everyone gets another go at the testnet activation. We've had partners in the past going, but I missed it. Can we run it again? That's what testnet in the box is for now.
All right. So the current NU5 timeline that Stephen is showing on the screen targets mainnet activation at the end of July, aka the 1st of August. So if we say that we can basically have a 2-week buffer of like something comes up sometime between, I don't know, sometime between at any time in here, basically, that needs to add up to 2 weeks to this timeline, which would push into August. So that would push theoretically would push activation into, say, August 15th or something like that. How much
fine to me.
How much time margin between the cutoff and the scheduled activation? 2 weeks? A week?
Sorry, ask that again.
I don't understand the
last
question.
part.
So,
Yeah.
so say we have a go, no go point, which is T minus N days from mainnet activation.
Yeah.
And we can keep pushing like up to 2 weeks, whatever the timeline is. But no matter what we do, is like as soon as we reach, like we get to 2 weeks, but if we get to like that 2 weeks, I don't know. I'm trying to make an analogy to a literal rocket launch.
What we could do,
we can delay the mainnet support.
Same thing.
Sorry, we can delay the mainnet support release, say, to mid-June.
And then we have a hard requirement that it's like a 2-month thing. That's an example.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay. Yes, that sounds about what I'm trying to get at.
So
yeah, if we find a bug after that, then we treat it as a security bug. But that's
not
basically
fun.
the cutoff point.
Yeah, that's not fun.
Okay.
So it sounds like we're all agreeing that something like June 15th would be a go, no-go date. So if on June 15th, the whole, like both client teams don't say we're very confident that this is good for the activation height set for mid-August, if we don't both feel that way in mid-June, then do we pull out a feature?
No, I don't think that's. I that's already including the buffer, which I don't think is
that wasn't quite what I
like
meant.
the go no go at the moment on this schedule is June 1st, or and like technically like a day or two before then, because we have to actually like make the release and
cut the release, right?
Cut the release. I think like I would look at this as being a soft poll, like a soft go no go poll for mid-May. Like when we have the implementation audit back at that point, we'll have the list of things. We'll have received some of it prior to that point. Right. But I would be doing a poll on this in mid-May, which is 2 weeks prior to the hard point on this current schedule. Because if we don't slip, the hard point is June 1st. Yeah. If we slip 2 weeks, that moves the hard point to mid-June, but we can't, which we can't move further than. But assuming we don't slip, like, if everything goes well, we still need the hard point to exist, and that would be June 1st.
Gotcha.
I find that confusing because what if it slips twice, like before, let's say in April or something, before testnet activation, there's like, oh, it's a bug, and let's push back testnet activation and mainnet activation and the Zcash D release schedule by 2 weeks. And then a week and a half later, or a month later,
we've then made a decision to slip everything. And it may just be that we were able to slip testnet activation without slipping the mainnet support release. Like there are options within there.
At that point, we will decide the new schedule.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you could move this to mid-May without altering any of the rest of this.
Okay.
Depending on, again, everyone would love a binary answer, but it kind of depends on what it is you're dealing with, I think, to some degree, at least.
There could be something that is a consensus bug, but is a one-line fix.
Yes. And it might also be like I think this is doable within a week, and then you get into the weeds and you're just like,
and that's kind of why I'd like to have that second half of May as being that kind of buffer for like, we think we can do it in 2 weeks, and then we attempt it.
Yeah. Okay.
I still I still want some way to avoid the problem of, if we had just one more week, again, we can fix this next issue. Because
so
I mean,
those kinds of
what is
things
actually the
tend to pile
what
up.
is actually the problem with slipping twice? If it's only 2 weeks and then another week?
There might not actually be a problem with that, but how about 2 months or 5 months?
Yeah, then we
Right.
drop a feature.
Right, but
Yeah, this
I
is that I know
feel
when I
it
see
would
it
help
kind
me
of
be
thing.
more comfortable if this whole group knew like
Yeah.
where the date was. Otherwise, because we could end up in a case where like we disagree about how much time it will take to fix something or whether or not it's worth it to extend it or kick it out. And I mean, we can just try to address that as a group in discussion, which I'm comfortable doing, just so long as we recognize if that situation happens, it might be like contentious or hard to negotiate.
Yeah, it might be a little bit fraught, but that's okay. I think there's a mistake we can make, which is trying to plan out the procedure too much in advance.
Yeah. Okay.
Because
I'll buy that.
We're talking about an unknown bug, so
right.
Yeah. One comment which doesn't really change anything, but for everyone to keep in mind that the Zcash Foundation in the form of Dodger asked this question because it helps them plan and understand and whatever. But there's a whole other audience, which is all of the, wallet makers and users and exchanges and investors and everyone else who has kind of similar questions. So even if we can successfully get together with all like the two of those orgs plus all the related stakeholders who are present today, and we can work out a new plan, if that new plan is unexpected to all that greater audience, there's still a cost. That's all.
And something else I want to point out to shore up my June 1st suggestion of a hard point is that, yes, like the two things we're proposing, and in general, the multiple zips that will go into upgrades will in general be relatively like separable, but there is still engineering work to do the separation. Like we're obviously trying to improve the builds of the nodes to make them switchable on and off as we can. But like, for instance, if we got an issue at the end of implementation audit and we took a week and was like, no, it's going to take longer than that and we want to turn it off, we essentially have until June 1st to decide to remove it. And that may still require a slip, but the slip is in order to give us time to pull that feature back out.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we should allow a slightly longer slip to remove a feature, because it's less likely that there will be another slip after that if the change is only to remove a feature.
So I have a question. I feel like this topic is concluding pretty well in my mind. So the question would be, how would Zebra's roadmap fit this, or should it be adjusted in any way to account for Zebra?
So we, now that the spec draft or the Orchard additions to the spec are pretty much done, and the Halo 2 and Orchard crate documentations are kind of settling, we're specifically allocating multiple engineer, not multiple days, but time this sprint to figure out what we need to do to make Zebra support Orchard and Halo. And some of those things are parallelizable and some of them are not, and they have a critical path. We have a strong suspicion that we can get this done on this timeline. We'll have more informed speculation at the end of this 2-week sprint. So March 8th is the end of the sprint. Yeah, but we're generally, especially myself and Tior are generally like, yeah, we think we can do this fine.
And if I understand the release, so you're doing like 2-week releases?
Yes. Yeah.
And so it could be that you could have like testnet readiness after the testnet activation date and sort of like catch up also, right? Is that an option?
I think that's an option. We have no feeling about whether we're gonna hit before testnet or prior to testnet or whatever. Yeah, so I have no signals about that. But in theory, yeah, we can do that. And what I mean by quote, get this done is we will have a Zebra be fully validating Orchard, and the remaining rules for, you know, Canopy and so on and so on, checkpointed. We will not be sending money in this network upgrade. We will not be minting transactions or proofs in this network upgrade. That will come later, but we will be validating Orchard as a full consensus node. That's what
Awesome.
that's the
Very good.
Just to throw in while we're kind of talking about it, our goal is to make it so that the Orchard crate is all you have to interface with,
cool.
and it kind of gives you this opaque. And we've been looking actually at your the way that you have implemented sapling and related things inside of Zebra to try to mimic it as best we can, so that the integration is simpler on your end.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thanks.
It's worth pointing out that the scope of what can go wrong if there's a consensus divergence between ZebraD and Zcash D is quite limited, because you're not using it for mining.
Correct. We're not using it for mining.
If you don't use a consensus node for mining, then it almost doesn't matter if it doesn't follow the chain.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's not desirable, but
there's one potential use case where it could be dangerous, which would be if anyone is using it to observe transactions
that's true.
and then make decisions based on it. So like if somebody's using it in their infrastructure and honoring deposits or whatever, but it's diverged, then that's dangerous for them because when they roll back, those transfers may disappear.
Right.
So that would be the one thing to be careful about.
The damage there is confined to people who are using it for that purpose. So there's no fallout to the Zcash D based network.
And I will say that our Zebra, as it currently operates and probably will through this network upgrade, is very developer-y. Like we don't have any user-friendly API to inspect the state of your chain state. Yet we have done user studies that have given us a lot of feedback about the things that we need to improve there. It is very much like this performs very well and participates very well in the peer-to-peer network and validating the chain. But in terms of like people using Zebra to observe the network or watch transactions or something like that, they would have to write more code to do that. Or, you know,
and hopefully
there's a verifiable delay function there.
So we're not that concerned about that sort of thing yet. We are like, our primary goal, especially for this, is like we want to be able to deploy Zebra instances to shore up testnet, especially because it'll help us test on testnet, but to shore up the network, to have a fast, secure, reliable node that you can just run all over the place and help make the network perform better, and then soon have a nice API on top of it, let you query it for metrics and what's the state of this transaction I sent or something like that.
Right.
Cool. So we have like 15 minutes left, so maybe we should
I popped back up to the agenda. So yeah, just a few things left. I think we have time to get through them. We kind of chatted about this last time as well, but what's kind of the take? I assume supportive. We're setting up working groups for like HSM support, pool life cycles. I think we even either Hudson set it up or we suggested setting up channels in the R&D Discord server that are, you know, kind of focused on maybe these subtopics.
So this was my. Sorry, Hudson.
I was just going to say they're set up. They're good. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Dodger. Yeah. Thank you, Hudson.
So my kind of thinking with this is that, you know, there's a lot of people on this call across a lot of time zones. A lot of it's very expensive call having all these people on it, and I think that, you know, if we're looking at specific topics like HSM support, you know, Pili from our side is going to be looking at doing some user studies. It would be great to get someone like Strad involved, who I believe has had a little bit of exposure, or has some knowledge of HSM stuff, and then just have a smaller group that can meet and coordinate on an ad hoc basis and kind of look at the problem, look at the challenge, and come up with some ideas or proposals that they then bring back to the larger group. And we're happy to kind of help really drive that from our side. But we'd really appreciate getting some of the ECC expertise, because I know that you guys have had some interactions with that space. And then similar for the pool life cycle, it sounds like ECC might even have a plan for being able to close that notorious GitHub issue that I opened. And again, just to talk about that, maybe document that and get solidify that a little bit, get something down on paper so that then it becomes a bit more clear. But again, just to take it away from this, to make it a smaller group who just work together on that, so that it doesn't feel like all the engineers from both organizations have to get involved.
Yeah, I mean, I'm supportive of that. It'd be good too to just kind of throw that up on a calendar where the community could pop in and listen. Or I know we've got some community members that have some background in HSM, I believe. So yeah, I mean, having it open to get input at large, I think would be great. But a more focused set of folks working on it, Dodger, like you're suggesting, and then just whenever we are in a larger meeting, just kind of a quick status update on progress or something would be great.
Yeah, I just posted, there's an issue on Zcash zips to write a zip called best practices for wallet handling in multiple pools. So that will be where our recommendations for how to handle pools live.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to have an actual sort of plan for deprecating Sprout entirely.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
I actually have a meta comment as we're talking about working groups and kind of going forward. So I think all of this is like really great to see, and I know we're all like excited, and thank you for kind of like looking at our checklist and like going so thoroughly through all of the things that we put out there. I do think some of like the larger meta concerns that were brought up in some of these conversations got lost a bit. Like for example, making sure we're kind of keeping our eyes on going fully shielded, for example. And I don't think there should be a working group. Like, I think what I would like to propose is maybe quarterly as a community in this call, we look at stats around like, what are the number of transactions that are transparent? What are the number of transactions that are shielded? And what are we doing just to make sure that our goals are aligned and going towards that, and we never kind of lose track of those goals.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
ZKRs.
ZK.
Like that's kind of a joke, but like actually I would love that. So like as a community, we say our ZKR is fully shielded and the number of users go up. And once a quarter, we look at that as a community and we say, okay, this is where we are. This is what's planned. Do we need to add additional things to what's being planned to make sure that we're encouraging or like getting towards those EKRs?
And ZOMG can come in and kind of say what we funded, where the milestones are there, and what's happening with all that to kind of hopefully provide some context to the metrics going up or down.
Yeah. Relatedly, we've been working on, trying to come up with some really good metrics, to kind of look at the ecosystem. And we've recently updated I think it's electriccoin.co/Zcash-metrics page with some new ways of looking at the anonymity set, for example. So those might be good, a good minimally starter set to talk about or look at or whatever. We do that once a month at this point, but we're looking at potentially making it a little bit more dynamic. But yeah, so
can we
good thoughts,
so
Chelsea.
Well, yeah, so Stephen, because you are kind of the agenda master for Arborist calls, can we add that as an agenda item to every Arborist call? Just like, here's
Sure.
the
Yeah.
metrics, let's like take a quick look. Have
Yeah,
them,
we
like,
can do that. Yeah,
Great.
absolutely.
That's great.
And yeah, compress
I
down
think
the first part and do it at the front. Yeah.
I think it might also help. And here I'm going to also refer back to insider knowledge, but I happen to know that Stephen has a presentation about how ECC has thought about progress towards fully shielded and what the sort of prerequisites would be for deprecating T addresses at some point in the future. And there's a whole bunch of considerations, but that thinking and brainstorming happened quite some time ago, but I think it's still relevant today, and it'd be great to I think have that. If ECC would like to share that, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I think
There-
actually I got the bulk of that from you, Dodger. So
I do think it would help very much to, so ECC has some known goals that we're all aligned behind. And then there are topics where we don't necessarily have a position or a plan yet, but we're like trying to sort it out. I think it would help if we can communicate better with the community, the difference between those and where those are. And that ties directly into like figuring out which metrics should we be targeting. So just to bring up something that could be controversial, so we have different perspectives on how important it is to support T addresses and for how long, because there's pros and cons. And I think it would really help if we have a way to sort of map out the pros and cons with the community, and also for us to like at ECC to be able to say like, oh, we haven't sorted out our position on this yet. I think that would be very helpful. And like another thing that comes to mind is the goal of shipping UDAs. I think most of us are pretty excited about that. There could be some disagreement. But then even when we largely agree on like a high level goal, digging into the tactics. So like, for example, for UDAs, figuring out exactly what are the target use cases and what are the goals of the feature, like which users will use it and what will they do and how will that impact all of the system. So so like we've expressed some concern about the economics of different possible designs, and it would help, I think, if as a community we have a way to like say, okay, well look, here's the design space and here's like a map of goals, and different people might hold different goals. Some people might disagree about goals, but we need kind of a way to visualize that. And then that's in addition to the easy part is when we agree as a community on goals, and it's much easier to just start running with them. But I feel like we need that whole spectrum. We need to be able to sort of map out and be able to discuss that whole spectrum of things we're less aligned on as well as things we're fully aligned on.
I'm very enthusiastic about UDAs, and I've been making sure that there will be enough room in the circuit to implement them.
All right, very good. Okay, and next item relative to so before I move on from the working group one, do we want to use like the channels Hudson set up for kind of async and then kind of naturally let folks gravitate? I'm interested in HSM. Let's just, this works for all of us. Let's meet whenever. Does that work? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right.
If we're missing one,
Internode,
just let me know and I'll make it.
okay.
But yeah,
All
I
right.
think we have most of them.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Hudson. Okay, Internode testing, ZebraD, Zcash D, very, very, very good idea and very germane, especially given that you're anticipating being able to sync and validate Orchard transactions. So Thoughts on how we could work together on the testing? I know we're working on test vectors. I know there's been
Yes.
some
Yeah.
conversations
So-
on test vectors.
So
Yeah.
I just had an idea, which it might be possible to do differential fuzzing. So
Ooh.
try and fuzz input blocks for which Zcash D and Zebra D differ.
That would be very cool. I was about to say.
Or transactions or whatever.
Yeah.
You do it at several levels.
That'll be extremely great. My brain is going to mush. One of the things that we specifically Zebra really need to test is we deploy 2 nodes on the regular to mainnet to make sure that we can run and sync. And so we are communicating regularly with a bunch of Zcash D nodes, but that's hundreds of however many are on mainnet and 2 plus or minus any development ones communicating in that sort of heterogeneous network. We really need to test things like a Zcash D node and a Zebra D node, or a bunch of Zebra D nodes and a minority of Zcash D nodes, things like that. That might leverage testnet in a box or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say.
Yeah.
So our other option. Oh, sorry, Deirdre.
Go ahead, Tior.
Oh, our other option on that is that testnet is often really small. So it only has 4 nodes or 8 nodes. So it's actually reasonably easy for us to get to a majority of Zebra nodes and run for a while and see how that goes. And yeah, definitely looking into the network protocol stuff is something that we've been doing a lot of work on, because it's probably one of the really different parts of Zebra and Zcash G is that we have a completely independent network stack with a very different internal idea of what the protocol should look like in order to make it easier to process messages. And yeah, we need to do quite a lot of testing on that.
Yeah.
Just a technical question. Can Zebra D mine on testnet?
We haven't implemented
Just
any
CPU
mining.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it can't yet.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you don't have any plans to do that in the NU5 timeframe?
No, not in the NU5.
No.
Okay. All right. Okay,
I did like a month or 2 ago consider porting our AC++ CPU miner to Rust just so that we could get rid of our CPU miner. I very quickly gave up. That was the very first thing I had to do when I joined DCC, and no thank you. No thank you.
If you are doing differential fuzzing and you're like, oh, we constructed a transaction or a block for Orchard, or even smaller pieces of like, oh, here is a Halo 2 based proof piece of transaction V5, and it makes it do weird thingy-majigs, like make sure that whatever you're doing on your side works with this. Extremely happy to hear it. We try to prop test all of our data structures that serialize and deserialize to the chain and to network messages. And so we'll probably be approaching it that way, but it's structured, so it's not guided. So it might not hit things that if you are using a proper like coverage guided or differential fuzzer would hit or generate. So two-way communication on any sort of like, we found an interesting variant of a block, a transaction, a proof, this, that, or the other thing. Extremely valuable. Yeah. But those are the ones on top of my head about one. We have tickets to deploy Zcash Ds to testnet as Docker nodes, just so that testnet performs better, is more reliable while we are doing integration testing. Second, deploying a bunch of Zebras to testnet because, as Tior said, we can make it a more heterogeneous network really easily. But
a herd of zebras.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But then the weirder cases about like if you just have like a whole bunch of zebras and one Zcash D or one of both of them, like how do they behave? We have kind of vague ideas of how they may behave, but we have not tested them. So.
Right.
I think we still have an open ticket that says that a one-to-one network doesn't work.
Right. Right.
But we should check if we fixed that, because we've made a lot of changes.
Yeah. Including today.
I'd love to do some kind of fuzzing at the message level or the network protocol level as well, because I think we would find a lot of bugs in Zebra that way, because we really haven't tested that stack very rigorously. But yeah, that I think would be really helpful in terms of, I don't know how possible it is to do Internode testing in that way, because what we're really talking about a lot of internal state. But certainly with Zebra, it would be easy enough to make sure that messages turn into our internal protocol in ways that we expect. Yeah. Both in and out, and that would be a good test for us to do, because we can separate that translation code from the rest of the state fairly easily.
Okay, very good. Okay, so we're almost out of time. So we can, I mean, again, we can keep going, you know, in the R&D Discord on testing, and if we need to, you know, we could even set up a little, you know, kind of working group on that, or get together as needed to sync up and work on testing. But that's a phenomenal idea. Marshall's on this call. Marshall's on the Dev Infra team at ECC, and largely responsible for testnet in a box. So if that was something anyone wanted to look into, you know, we're more than happy to help, you know, if there's any, you know, any bumps in the road with that. So yeah, glad to do that. And then the last item we had was kind of call structure going forward. The frequency was one of the things. So does the 2-week cycle seem to work well for everyone? Is that
so far I like it, because we can alternate, like, you know, every 2 weeks we have fewer, you know, project updates to talk about, and we can get through them quicker. And then the alternating times, we can talk about more about this stuff. And so,
like a deeper dive every other time, or longer period of just open discussion, if you will.
Yeah.
So Tior asks, is Marshall on Discord? Marshall, if not, I think he probably will be. I'm not sure if he's had the opportunity to pop in there yet.
Yes.
He was on this call earlier.
I'm on the shared bridge and all the other Discord channels. You can direct ping me too. I think it's mdroid's the alias on that one.
Cool.
Okay.
Just like my GitHub, I think.
Yeah, then in terms of structure, does it work to have, like, you know, like node updates every other time, and then, you know, obviously there's a period of discussion in each one. It would just be longer in one versus the other. And then we can kind of roll in, you know, like we can roll in the first, you know, call it full arborist call after the first of the month when we have new metrics. We could make sure, as Chelsea suggested, let's just, you know, pop a slide on there with a few of the metrics and just talk about those for a second. See how we're doing, see how things, make sure things are trending in the right direction. So we could do that, for example. And then Dodger brought up, like, you know, rotating the hosting or co-hosting, or I'm totally fine with any or all of that. Yeah, whatever, you know, the group would like to do. I'll go back and research, like, the live streaming, like how, you know, mechanically, you know, no one has to worry about that. Like, mechanically, how do we do that? Make sure that's all set up. But yeah, just any thoughts on anything along the lines of how we do the calls going forward and the format? Yeah, just love to hear ideas. So.
Yeah, one thing I had that I found works really well across a bunch of different calls I've done, including some specification calls, enterprise calls, Ethereum related calls, is to have we call it a PM repo, and I just posted the link in chat, and then a sample agenda, and basically moving all discussion on agenda items and what needs to be discussed to GitHub into an issue. because a lot of us are on GitHub, and so it's a little easier than having to ping you every time, Stephen. And I bet that takes a load off you for not having to keep up with everybody messaging you about this.
Right.
That makes it also is a good place to like house the README is a good place to house all previous videos and like any notes that were taken and agendas and stuff like that, so you can go back and kind of see when decisions were made.
All right. Yeah, no, that's a good idea. I'll look at those links too and encourage everyone to do so. And yeah, so just any thoughts? I mean, we'll meet again I'll get the meeting set up so we're back on again in 2 weeks. I think right now the subsequent meetings are still set up on that monthly thing, but since 2 weeks looks like it's going to work, I'll reset the series for every couple weeks. And yeah, we can continue to iterate on like call for format, structure, how we want to do hosting, how we want to get things on the agenda, discussion points, past discussions, and things like that. So one of the
Oh, go ahead, Dodger.
I kind of like the idea, which I think we have done in this call, of moving towards a bit of a bit of, having those subgroups, then providing the updates and getting seeing their recommendations, getting ideally consensus support on the call, but also a little bit of a discuss and decide sort of approach, like we did today with the with setting that June 1st date. Being able to get together and thrash these things out, and then say, right, this is what we have agreed. Assuming that consensus is reached, this is what we as a group of people who have a real interest in this protocol agree is.
It's important to write down what people think they've agreed, because otherwise different people come away with different impressions.
One thing I wanted to just quickly put out there for about 15 seconds is I wanted to do a thing, and I might do this a week from now. In fact, I probably should just say I'm going to do this a week from now at the same time as this call. That's just like an hour call where I get feedback from people about how Zcash works, and then I talk about how Ethereum works, so that I can kind of cross-pollinate best practices from both. Because I know we're having some struggles in Ethereum with some of our organization, and y'all are so much more organized. And then at the same time, there's some stuff I think y'all can learn from how we do things with our developer meetings and our ecosystem. So same time next week, I'll send out a Zoom link on the R&D Discord and in the forums.
Awesome.
Yep, that works for me.
Yeah, cool. Sounds like a good idea. Okay, anyone have anything else today? I just want to say things are so positive and headed in the right direction. I can't thank Hudson enough for helping out with like the Discord server and all the great ideas. And it's just been it feels really good to just kind of accomplish things on a call and get everyone lined up. So it's goodness. Yeah.
Yeah, like the community outside of Zcash, just to give y'all an insight, y'all are the top tier engineers. Like people are jealous in other projects of how good you all are with your stuff. So
yeah.
That's cool. Very good. Yeah, I'm continually amazed. I just sit back and get my popcorn out and watch as everyone just does this amazing stuff all the time. So anyway, all right, very good. Well, look, everyone have a good rest of the day, and headed into a weekend.
You do a little bit more than that, Stephen.
Oh, Stephen froze.
Oh, I did? Okay, am I back? It says my internet connection's unstable. Sorry. But anyway, everyone look.
Oh no.
I believe he was going to say, have a good
Murphy's
weekend.
Law.
And this was great. Way to go. Thank you all. And come back next time.
You're back, but you keep cutting out. So we're going to say goodbye.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye, Stephen.
Bye-bye.
Bye
Cheers
all.
all. Bye.